video is not just the standard steps in how we investigate bullying and harassment. You need to appoint an investigating officer, you need to do interviews, you need to take notes. I'm not touching on all of that. There's plenty of videos about that, and I've got videos about that in terms of how to do an investigation. But what I want to deep dive into is how we really understand what bullying and harassment is. Firstly, quick introduction to those that haven't seen me before. I'm Jenefer, I'm the founder of Silk Helix. We specialise in supporting businesses with all things HR, people management, and we specialise in neurodiversity. I do training for management teams. I can come in and talk to your management team about this very subject, and we also provide advice. So going through these types of processes, we would handhold managers and guide them through doing an investigation. So these are the things that I've come across that often get ignored when we're doing bullying and harassment investigations, and people often don't realise. Firstly, why is it so important that we do? It's important because, okay, we've got the ACAS definition of bullying, we've got legal definitions of harassment from the Equality Act. I'm not going to go into those. I will just put them on screens. Pause if you want to read those definitions. But it's more important than that because those definitions don't really outline the subtle behaviours that somebody who is experiencing bullying or harassment may be experiencing. And in my experience, managers investigating bullying and harassment really struggle with the proof, but I can't prove it. What they're looking for is that one example, that one thing that's really going to be like, yeah, this person's definitely bullying. And that one thing will be something like smacking them around the face or being stood over them, and saying, you're a silly idiot, you're a silly idiot. Don't want to say worse words on a YouTube video, but you know what I mean, that thing that really looks like absolutely nobody's going to dispute this is bullying. And the reality is that's very rarely what we get when it comes to bullying and harassment situations. And I had one case where this went so badly wrong because the investigation looked into the bullying, presented lots of examples, and it was all those kind of little examples. And what we had was the perpetrators, the accused, saying, no, we didn't do it. It wasn't like that. That wasn't my intention. When it went to disciplinary hearing, the people chairing the hearing, who were not trained, didn't even read the investigation, believed every word that the perpetrator said in the disciplinary hearing. Well, they're saying they didn't do it, so we can't discipline them for it. And what came out of that was 2 people left in employment who shouldn't have been because they were bullying. Other people leaving in their droves then because they didn't want to stay or couldn't stay in an environment where they were being treated like that. And ultimately, the bullies being given more power within the organisation because they've now been told, oh, you did nothing wrong, you can carry on doing that. And they've got their position. So this creates a really toxic, unhealthy work environment. That particular organisation wasn't very long after that they actually ended up closed down and are no longer there. And so that's a real shame because they were providing some good services in the care community. And that is the potential seriousness of what we're talking about. So what is it important that we understand and that we recognise? Firstly, we don't need a confession in order to discipline someone. In fact, if somebody has been bullying, quite often they're going to deny. Quite often they'll actually use tactics where they accuse the person they've been bullying of bullying them. They will use deflection. They will say, oh, but that thing going on over there, or that thing going on over there. They will raise all these other issues. They will claim that people have been bullying them. And that makes it really difficult to deal with for HR professionals. And I'm going to be the first to say, we don't get any training in this. This is something I think that we're actually really let down on as HR professionals because we're relied upon to deal with many of these really big and quite traumatising issues and not given the training as part of our qualifications to deal with this. So it's up to organisations independently to train their HR professionals and their managers to recognise these behaviours. And when we recognise the behaviours, we're also more likely to pick up on them and see them happening in the work environment before it gets to the point where we're having to do an investigation into bullying and harassment. And what we're talking about is the sort of subtlety of behaviours. So really common things that we might see would be triangulation, would be one of them, would be kind of smear campaigns, gossiping, so telling people about somebody else with a view to trying to persuade that person to have a negative opinion of them. It could be telling one person one thing, one person something else, not providing somebody with all the information they need to be able to do a really good job. It can be things like overly criticising, so not providing any positive feedback, only providing the negative feedback. And some of this can be really subtle because that negative feedback may be founded. There may be some elements of truth in that negative feedback. But what we find is if we've got that little bit, but actually we haven't got the bigger picture of more positive feedback or the way it's been given, tone of voice can often come into this as well. So if we've got a context where somebody is feeling that they're only getting negative feedback, and then they're kind of getting looks or there's tone of voice or things like that, that can be really hard to describe. It can be really hard to pinpoint to say this is behaviours of bullying. And it really is a collection often of behaviours that make up this bigger picture of bullying. So we have to be really careful that we're not looking for that one incident where we can say, oh yeah, they beat you up, yeah, that's definitely bullying, because we do get that sometimes in the work environment. Let's not pretend, but it's not very often. In fact, more often, we got these kind of more subtle behaviours. And it can be things like putting high expectations on somebody, expectations that they can never meet. Setting them up to fail can be another one as well. It can be deflection, it can be projection. So deflection being when something gets brought to us, so we that somebody might say a boundary or criticism or feedback, and then we come back with, but don't remember you did that. So you're constantly putting somebody on the back foot where they've got to defend themselves, and those kind of behaviours can make somebody feel very unsafe and very uneasy in a work environment where they constantly feel like it doesn't matter what they say or what they do, they've got to defend themselves, and negative spin is going to be put on that. Because bear in mind, most things we do in life can have a positive or a negative spin put on them, and it can be kind of easy for somebody to turn all those things to that negative that can make it look like, okay, actually, I can see some truth in that. So when you're doing the investigation, you're sort of thinking, okay, well, I can see why you sort of see it like that. And what we need to look at is, do we need to see it like that? Or actually, is this more nuanced? Is it like, okay, yes, there's that negative, but actually that negative is better than these positives kind of put together, that kind of thing. So it's those sorts of subtleties that we really need to look at when we're doing investigations. We also need to bear in mind that very often we're putting the burden of proof onto the victim to prove that they have been bullied, to demonstrate and explain, and it can be really traumatising. These behaviours can be really traumatising, and because they're often not small, but kind of small in individual examples, writing down notes, keeping diary records, especially when you're traumatised by it as well, can be really hard to do. And we put that burden onto victims by saying, well, you need to go to the perpetrator and say, I don't like this, I don't want this. You need to be the one to take notes, keep records, have a diary. And I think we need to bear in mind how much we're doing that and how much expectation we're putting on people. And how strong does somebody really need to say, actually, I don't like that. That's not acceptable. I don't want you to continue doing that. How often do we really need to repeat those words? And I think, again, often we set the bar too high, as if somebody's had a day where they've literally walked up to the perpetrator and gone, you know those things you say about me? I don't like that, and I would like you to stop. How realistic is that really? Is it right to put that expectation on somebody who is experiencing bullying or harassment? I don't think it is, and I don't think it needs to be quite that obvious. I think as much as the behaviours of bullying can be quite subtle, I think actually no can also be quite subtle. It doesn't need to be an outright, no, stop doing that. I don't think it needs to be at that level for somebody to be recognised, for it to be clear that actually this is causing harm and this person doesn't like that. And look also at where somebody's not speaking, where somebody is silenced, where somebody feels like, actually, I can't say that. If somebody is able to go up to somebody and say, well, you're bullying me, there's quite a lot of confidence in that. If somebody really is being bullied, are you able to walk up to somebody and say, you're bullying me? Is there going to be some fear to do that? Is there going to be fear of what the repercussions might be from doing that? I think there would be in most cases. I'm not saying that's going to be in all cases, but I think in most cases there's going to be some kind of fear. There's going to be some kind of fear of speaking out. And bear in mind, in an employment relationship, people have got to pay their rent, their mortgages, put food on the table. There is absolutely an imbalance of power. And if I go to my boss and say, you're bullying me, I'm not happy with that, there is a risk that's going to get worse. There's a risk that I'm going to lose my job. These risks are really high risks to take. So we really also need to look at where are people being silenced? Where are people not saying because of that fear? And let's not forget that bullying can go both ways. This one really challenges me as a HR professional because it shouldn't do. As managers, we are in the position of power. We can discipline, we can dismiss, particularly as business owners. But I do hear it. I hear of business owners, the people with the power to dismiss somebody, being bullied by their employees and not dealing with it. That for me is something that really needs to be tackled. And I find quite surprising when I go in how often I'm told by business owners, by managers, that they feel they're being bullied upwards. And they don't have the tools, they don't know what they can do to deal with it. That's where if you are in charge of a management team, getting them training on how that they can investigate and deal with bullying and harassment is so important. Not just to protect the team, protect all of your individuals from bullying and harassment, but also the managers themselves. Making sure that they know there is an answer, they know there is something that they can do. Because you can guarantee if somebody's bullying their manager, they're going to be bullying other people within the team as well. They're not going to be the nicest person elsewhere. There's also a common misconception that often the person who is doing the bullying and harassment is some kind of superstar. They are great at their job. They are somebody that gets all the sales. Often they're not. Often they're actually more mediocre than we think, but they present a very good picture of themselves, which creates an image that they are this superstar within the workplace. And again, that can create a fear of dismissing this person or a fear of dealing with it because of the benefits that they bring to the business. But what that hides, sweeps under the carpet is the toxicity that they create, the damage they create to everybody else in the business and then the business as a whole. And as I said with the story at the beginning of this video, of an organisation that's literally gone out of business in part because of a situation like this. So if you'd like me to come in and talk to your management team about bullying and harassment, how we investigate that, particularly in preparation for the new legislation coming in with a duty to prevent sexual harassment, then details are in the description below of how you can get in touch. In the meantime, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a single video.